Hi, everybody. My name is Anna, and I'm the regional lead for the West of England at Slate, which is home to Quids. And I want to welcome you all to our Quids professional network event called Following the Crisis, Follow the Money, Cutting Through the Cost of Living. As most of you will probably know, Quids publishes magazines and guides and online content which provide money hints, tips, and guidance to people on a low income throughout the UK. And the Quids is a money skills initiative of Clean Slate Training and Employment, and our organization is a CIC, which is a community interest company. Jeff, our founder and managing director, he is just waving there for me. He's on the top left corner, not quite sure where he is for you. He's here, and he will be speaking a bit later and explaining a bit more about the service. He has a really good presentation, and we'll elaborate a bit more on that. I'm just going to run through a few more bits about, I don't know if you can call it housekeeping if it's an online event, probably not, but maybe just talk you through the agenda and what we're going to be or what you can expect of this event. So before we start, can I just check that everybody, apart from the people that are going to be speaking, have their mics switched off? We have 2 speakers today, and one of them is Penny Germon, who's in the room as well. Thanks, Penny, for coming. The other one will be Jeff, as I mentioned earlier. And we will have, after every session, a question and answer session, and we will use the question and answer function in Google Meets. Now, maybe not all of you are very familiar with Google Meet. There is, on the very bottom left corner down here, there's like 3 little symbols. And if you click on that, a window should pop up where you can then put any questions or any comments in. And then after the presentation of the speaker, Emma and Lisa will draw those out and feed them back to the speaker, and we will go through all of them. If you have any issues, please just pop something in the comments and we can pick it up. There's loads of people monitoring that at the moment, so it should be resolved hopefully really quickly. The event will be recorded. As you probably have seen, the record button is already on. Probably should have said that earlier on, just for those people that weren't able to attend, because obviously there's a lot of holidays going on at the moment. Unfortunately, a lot of COVID going around as well. So we just wanted to make sure that people don't miss out, and that we will send it. And if you would like to have a recording of it, that's not a problem at all. Just let us know, pop it in the comments box, or send us an email and we can forward it to you, so you can either look back at it or share it with colleagues or whoever you think would be interested in it. Near the end of the event, we will post a link in the question and answer section as well as in the comment section, which is going to be like a feedback. I don't want to call it survey or questionnaire, because that will maybe, freak people out. It sounds like a very long thing. It's just a few questions, really. If you could give us an idea as to how you felt the event went, if you got everything out of it you were hoping for, how we could maybe do things differently the next time, because we are planning on doing quite a few next times, hopefully. So that would be really, really helpful and much appreciated. We will also put in a link to our Quids Professionals Network, where you can sign up. Most of you probably are signed up with that already, because that's why you're here, or maybe somebody has shared it with you, or you've got it through social media. Our Quids Professional Network is made of predominantly people that are here now. So these are people that work in social housing, local authorities, financial capability, digital inclusion, and welfare support. And we send out monthly newsletters that are full of useful hints, tips, news, blogs, updates on policies, and so on. So if you're not signed up for it already and you would like to, then there's a chance at the end of the event that you just click on the link and then you can sign up, or again, just pop us an email and we are happy to assist with that. Right, I think and I hope I covered most or all of what I should be covering at the very beginning, and I think we're going to be ready to start now. So we all know that low-income households are experiencing what is a perfect storm in the moment in terms of financial well-being, and the cost of living crisis is putting households at risk, and some are already drowning, some are on the verge. The pressure that people are experiencing is not been felt since the 1980s, and many people are really struggling at the moment. I think a lot of people that never needed to budget need to budget. We're seeing an increase, obviously, throughout all costs, more increases to come in October. And then recently it was, I think, announced that there might be another increase in energy costs in January yet again, which is all slightly terrifying, I think, for many people. So our event today, Following the Crisis, Follow the Money, is set up so that we can talk to people, that we can join the dots, see where we can work better together and collectively support people on a low income. People keep popping in. Sorry, I got a bit distracted there. So I think I'm just gonna probably introduce the first guest speaker now, which is Penny Germon. She's the Head of Service, Neighbourhoods and Communities, Public Health Division and People Directorate of Bristol City Council, and she's agreed to come and join us today to give her presentation about Bristol One City approach of the cost of living crisis. I can't see Penny on my screen at the moment, but I'm sure. Oh yeah, up here, there you are. Sorry, Penny, there's so many pictures. So many people. Are you happy for me to hand over to you?
Yeah, that's fine. Good morning, everybody. Very pleased to be here. So I'm just going to share my screen and take you through a few slides which kind of explain our thinking and our approach to the cost of living crisis here in Bristol. Can you see the first slide?
Yes, it's there, Penny, thanks.
Well, lovely, thank you. So, as has been said, we know that the crisis will have far-reaching impact and implications, and all the projections show the situation is getting worse. We know it's already causing real hardship, anxiety and stress. We also know that Bristolians will be doing all they can to adapt and stretch resources. We also know that organisations are facing very difficult times. So collectively, we are in difficult times and there are no easy answers. So our view is that we have to pull together as a city like we did in COVID-19. And we all have our part to play in that. And what we saw in COVID-19 was that the community response was very much at the forefront. That's where the energy really came from. And we got behind that as a local authority and as a one city. So citizen and neighbourly action is really important. And I know that those WhatsApp groups that proved so effective in responding to COVID-19 are being used to share tips and signpost each other and share information and share things. Behind that, the neighbourhood and community leadership and the infrastructure that provides the city is critical that we get behind that and support it. We're taking a one council approach and a one city approach. There are three key stages that we've gone through. So what do we know? So what's the impact likely to be in Bristol? And of course that's changing, so we're evolving that. What have we got? So what are our city, our civic and our community assets? And then what can we do? What's our coordinated action? So this is a diagram of kind of just a kind of some examples of what we talk about in terms of one city. So there are lots of different networks, and our approach is about how we can kind of coordinate or align a very complex picture. So we're not taking, this isn't a top-down, these are the cost of living services or anything like that. It's just, there's an element of holding what lots of people are already doing. Poverty existed before the cost of living crisis. Lots of people, you in this Google Meets room, are all in that business anyway. So this just gives you an example of the kind of conversations and the people that are a part of this. So the Health and Wellbeing Board is taking the oversight for the one city. We have the integrated care system, locality partnerships. We have a regular meeting that the mayor hosts with community workers. We have something called the Community Exchange, which is a meeting between the City Council and community and voluntary sector organisations that was so vital in the COVID response. And then there's the one city infrastructure that we have. So in terms of impact, so the JRF, these are figures that you're probably aware of, but we're estimating that nearly 1 in 4 households, so around 50,000 households across the city, will be spending £1 out of every £5 on their household budgets. Really significantly for Bristol, that they're homes to 1/3 of Bristol's children. In terms of the impact from the Chancellor's statement, you will all be familiar with what that changed, and our assessment is that there is still a cost of living crisis. Inflation is still rising. This is a one-off contribution. Obviously, very helpful. In terms of the Trust did a bit of research, and we have nearly 39,000 universal credit claimants in Bristol, and the estimate, this is earlier in the year rather than very recent modelling, but more than half of those were reported to be going without at least one of the absolute essentials, half already behind with their bills, facing a constant struggle to keep up. 2 in 5, so 40%, already in debt, and 1 in 3 unable to afford adequate food. So we're kind of thinking about what that means for Bristol and the 39,000 universal credit claimants. So we've mapped where we think there's going to be the greatest impact. This is an interactive map. I can't show you the interaction now, but for each of the areas we're mapping kind of food insecurity, fuel poverty, child poverty, universal credit claimants, and income deprivation. And of course we know that the main risk and the main impact will be on people who are already on low incomes and already experiencing the impacts of poverty. So our work is very much about focusing on the red and the orange areas. And broadly, it follows the areas of deprivation, but there are some differences. So in addition to geography, we know that there are communities who already experience inequity that will be impacted. And the graph on the right shows you the difference in that people pay in terms of when people pay their bills via prepayment meters. So we know that that's one of the poverty costs, if you like, and the difference that is projected for the winter, and that's likely to have gone up, is really significant, as you can see. So one of the things that we're doing, and we've given some thought to, is how do we try and understand what's happening to the people of Bristol in fairly real time. So we've thought about the things that indicate what's happening, and we are bringing together a kind of dashboard or a weekly report, and some of the data won't change weekly. This is just the beginning. On this graph, it shows you council tax reduction scheme claims, discretionary housing payments, and the local crisis prevention fund payments. And at the moment, they're level. So we're very much data driven. So in terms of what we're doing, and our framework for action. So our working principles are that we are focusing on citizens and communities most at risk of further poverty and inequity. We very much want to take a social justice approach. So this is about dignity, about respect and equity, and people having real agency in their own lives. We need to build on and grow what we have. We haven't got lots of money. But everyone's doing this on top of what they're already doing, and we know that in the wake of the pandemic, resources are depleted. We want to coordinate access to immediate crisis support, but also focus on resilience. And that can be a very difficult thing to do, can't it? When you're when the tendency is to meet the immediate crisis and to want to help. But it is so critical that we build strength and resilience, and we invest in community building. We're joining up across teams, services and organisations, and that's about making greater use of what we have. We're all greater than the sum of the parts kind of thing. We know the approach need to be seasonal and will need to be sustained over the next few years, and we'll learn as we go. We'll adapt and evolve our response. As I've said, inequity and social justice is really at the heart of our approach, and we know that the cost of living crisis will widen inequity. We saw in COVID how the disproportionate impact on women, working class communities, Black people, disabled people, older people and younger people. And we can't stop this. We can't solve the cost of living crisis. But what we can do is make sure that we reach those communities and work in an appropriate way. So this has got to be about social justice. So our framework for action has 4 core themes: immediate emergency and welfare support. So that's access to things like crisis payments and food banks, maximising household income and reducing living costs. So that's about employment and benefit support, property insulation advice, council tax rebates, those kinds of things, your business. Keeping well, so mental health, emotional well-being support, and the network of what we're calling welcoming places or spaces. And then community assets and community wealth building. So that's about the strength of our communities, building community assets, strategic priorities and food resilience, those kinds of things. So where are we now? So we've got an impact assessment that we update regularly, and that's led by my colleagues in public health. And we also have a monitoring framework, and we will be from next week. There'll be a weekly data report, very much like we're doing for COVID. We have an infrastructure for coordination and collaboration. That's through the One City, but also through our kind of networks with the community and voluntary sector and those neighbourhood organisations. In terms of core to this, we see as neighbourhood coordination, and we're working with about 26 community hubs. That's neighbourhood, but also equality communities. And as we did with COVID, we'd be looking to for them to coordinate what's happening in their neighbourhoods and to take the lead, and we're looking to find some resources for that. We're currently in conversations. We're having workshops with community and voluntary sector partners and also public sector partners around mental health and emotional well-being and advice, and also the community hubs, what those look like, how they're defined and how we work together, and really critically, what can we do with what we have? How can we grow what we have with very little money? We're doing work on communications, our City Council website, cascading key messages through teams across the sectors. What we're trying to do is we're seeing if we can, a bit like COVID, hands, face, space, fresh air, that kind of thing. We're trying to think about, are there 5 key messages in terms of cost of living that are kind of easy for everyone to remember, but that point people in the right direction. Through COVID, we had the We Are Bristol helpline, a free phone number that anybody could ring. We had an offer which was very much around practical support, but we're, as many local authorities did, but we're looking to see whether we can use that for the cost of living crisis. And that in COVID, somebody was able to ring the We Are Bristol helpline and then be put in touch with their local community hub and get some support. So we're looking to see if we can do the same thing again. We just need to make it practical and containable. We're looking at ways where people can donate part of or all of the additional money that they've been given if they want to do that. So some kind of Bristol fund. We're developing a network of welcome places where we would and what we're thinking about those places, if you think of that in the context of a community sitting room, or many community centres are already set up to be welcome places. Libraries are set up to do that. So this isn't a kind of special thing. It's elevating what we have and making it helpful for people. And it's about connecting people and whole communities. So what we're not wanting to do is create places for poor people. What we want to do is create places where communities can come together, where you can charge your phone, access Wi-Fi, get a cup of coffee, those kinds of things. And we've got one city plan in place for September. That's our goal. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Penny. That was really interesting, and I picked up on a few things. I'm impressed with the word of using the word of community and really putting an emphasis on that. The community spaces that you've been describing sound really, I think, a really good step forward, because especially after pandemic, I think a lot of services that have offered face-to-face support have seen definitely a decline in people picking that up. So I think encouraging people to come out and mingle again and getting that support that they have missed out, potentially vital support through the pandemic. So that would be amazing, and I can't wait to hear more about that. So I think my neighbor is doing some building work. The other one that I really found interesting was the 5 key messages, similar to the COVID ones. So I'm going to be really curious and interested to see what these will be. In terms of question and answers, Emma and Lisa, are there any questions and answers in our question and answer section that we want to put forward to Penny?
Yes, there are a few, Penny, if that's okay. One is from a few people actually. Are we able to share the slides with everyone afterwards?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. And then a question from Dawn Woods. Is the We Are Bristol helpline open now?
No, in terms of, no, we're kind of exploring what that should look like. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then there was one in the Q&A. This is from Millie. She'd like to know more about the community hubs that you've mentioned, how they're set up, who is involved, what does a neighbourhood geography look like?
So we're very much building on what happened in our COVID-19 response, and that was very much community led. So we didn't prescribe geography, we weren't in a position to prescribe geographies, but I think that was very advantageous, because basically communities organised around what they define as neighbourhoods. The tricky thing for us is when we came to put that on a map, it was that was the hard bit. So a neighbourhood in most cases is that it's the geography that many of the anchor organisations, community centres already work in. So our starting point is talking to those 26 organisations that we've been working with for some time, and asking them what they currently do and what it would be possible to do if they had a bit more resource. And that will look different in different parts of the city. So our idea is to kind of say, this is what we think as a minimum. So this is collectively, not us, as I'm from Bristol City Council, but this is very much a one city response. So what our workshops that we've had recently have been about defining what's the very basic of a community hub. So that's the coordination, access point thing, and what's the very basic of a welcome space or welcome place. And it's most basic. It's a place where you can hang out. Nobody's going to chuck you out, and where you can, connect and have a chat with other people. So a library could be a welcome place, and also have access to loos and those kind of things. And then many of our partners are thinking about how can they extend their opening hours, how can they make available subsidised tea and coffee, or how maybe providing somebody making community meals, so not meals to hand out. So it's not a food bank type model. It's a kind of we're in this together kind of model. So at the moment, organisations are working on what it is that they think they can do, and then what we'll do is we'll map that so that that information is available, and then there's a whole comms thing in terms of the citizens of Bristol knowing where they're local, where they can connect and spend time locally. So in many ways, it's about just promoting what's already there, but seeing if we can extend that. We're thinking about, there's lots of thoughts around volunteers and how we can, can we use better site? Can we train people in very like signposting? Are there people who would be kind of welcomers and be there to kind of signpost people to different support if that's required? But that's not, we're not calling them cost of living crisis centres or anything like that. So the geography, if you know Bristol, might be Knoll West, might be Hartcliffe, might be St Paul's, Easton, those kind of neighbourhoods. Yeah. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Lisa.
No, over to you, Emma.
There was another question, which was from Ian Corey. And is COVID and cost of living crises, are they similar? And will we get the same community response? Ian adds, COVID affected everyone, but the cost of living is different and it doesn't affect us all.
Well, they're clearly different things, and like you say, the cost of living is, with COVID, everything stopped, and we all focused on COVID. We're in very different territory, but we learned a lot about working together and what was possible, and that's what we're building on. So we're not saying this is the same as COVID at all. What we're saying is that we're kind of building on what we've learned in terms of working together, and the leadership, community leadership, which is really very important. So we'll see in terms of what the kind of call to action and volunteers. It will be interesting to see what happens. But our sense is that there will be people that will be willing to give time, but we won't know until we ask. But I think there is a concern about that. But yeah, we'll see.
And thank you, Penny. And Ian had a follow-up question, which is that COVID required us to work digitally, and COVID is on the rise. How can cost of living support be delivered digitally? I think Jeff's got a few things to say about that in a minute as well.
I'll probably leave that to Jeff then, but yeah, no, absolutely, and it's something that we're very mindful of in terms of what would we do, what would our response be, and we haven't worked that out yet, but it's very much on our list of we're thinking about the same thing. Yeah.
Can I just check in the middle, in between, if everybody is still on mute, because I am getting a bit of background noise. Thank you.
There are a few more questions. I'm just checking in, Anna, that we've got time to go through some more. I think we've got until 10:40. I'm going to go straight on to Tracy's comment. The impact and monitoring framework you said is being put together in public health. Are they working with all internal and external agencies for feedback to build a bigger picture of the impact?
We certainly are working with a very large network of organisations. Yeah, so we have a One City coordination group that meets every week, and that includes a whole variety of advice organisations, of public sector and voluntary organisations, the school sector. So I don't know if everyone, and of course there is a lot of information, but we're certainly doing our best to try and understand the holistic picture.
Thank you. And there's another question from Denise that says, have you considered offering small grants, maybe via Quartet CF, to seed fund community initiatives, especially the welcome places and spaces.
We are in discussions with Quartet about that.
Great. I'm going to quickly mention, I think it's Jenny or Jen T has said there is a place in Bath which does that with the meals on a Wednesday. So I'm just going to flag that comment up in the chat. And just rolling through, I think.
Yeah, I think that's.
Lisa, have I missed anything?
No, I think all good. Mel Shaw has just popped up. We are seeing our communities and many of our services at full capacity, so we'll be really interested how you're building capacity with no additional funding. Great, it's a comment rather than a question. Great, okay. So thank you, everyone. I'm back over to Anna.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Penny, obviously. It was really good to hear your presentation. And what I did want to mention, and I forgot earlier, was that when I started building the Bristol service here, and whenever I started meeting people in networking event, everybody always said, oh, you're going to need to speak to Penny. You're really going to need to speak to Penny. So you can imagine how chuffed and excited I am that you're here today. Thank you really a lot. That means a lot. I forgot to mention earlier when I said what to expect of the meeting that we're going to have also breakout rooms after our next speaker. It's a speaker. It's Jeff. It's not guest. And I just wanted to make you aware we're going to break out in breakout rooms. You're going to get invitations. These ones will be led by members of Clean Slate, and I will let you know the questions right after the next presentation, just so you know what's coming. So on to our next speaker, which is Jeff, which is our founder and managing director of Clean Slate Training and Employment and home to Quids. And he will talk a bit about practical example and responses to the crisis, our WECA funded project in the west of England at the moment, which is called Follow the Money, and it's being delivered in Baines, South Gloucester and in Bristol, and is saving an average of £1,000 per person on financial gains, and also offers some long-term and short-term non-financial gains. Jeff, are you ready to take it away?
Yep. Okay, thanks, Anna. Right, hopefully you can see that.
Yes.
Firstly, I just need to apologise. I'm just getting over COVID, as I'm calling it. You know, where you feel like you've got COVID, but you're testing negative. So if I'm a bit woolly-headed, that's why. Perhaps I'll on the recording I'll dub over anything that I ramble on about while delivering this presentation. But yeah, I'm Jeff, Managing Director for Clean Slate, and I founded the organisation in Bristol and Bath back in 2006, having been in the region for a lot longer than that, because I was originally a Managing Director, or not originally, but I became Managing Director for the Big Issue Southwest and the Big Issue London for a time, and then returned to the Southwest to set up Clean Slate. Some of that will give some context to what I'm going to present about what we've been working on at Clean Slate. In terms of this presentation, I'm going to quickly introduce to those of you who don't know Clean Slate and Quids in already, just a quick overview of what we do and what we've been doing. Look at issues around financial resilience and the findings that we've had around the needs of people that we've been working with who are on low incomes. And I'm going to introduce Follow the Money, which is our newly funded, or WECA funded, programme for the West of England, as one example of a practical response to the cost of living crisis. It's no suggestion that this is the silver bullet or that we're better than anyone else, just to raise awareness about what we're doing, but also to hopefully inform some discussion about what we could potentially be doing together, and how we can potentially collaborate as well. So just by way of overview, I'm going to start with kind of our set of values really for Clean Slate, which we had a staff day in April, which was the first time that we had been able to get everyone, our staff team, together physically in a room since offices before the pandemic, many of whom we hadn't met. So our organisation increased in size by, I think it was 5 times over during the pandemic. And then when we got together, we started to review what means the most to us as an organisation. And we really felt that the people that we're working with, parts of our community who are struggling most financially, they lack visibility, whether that's in policy or service development. And also they don't seem to be heard in terms of their needs. And this was something that we felt that we've been really responding to very practically and very positively. And also that they're not seen as part of the solution to some of the problems that their neighbours and their communities, their parts of our community, are struggling with. And because we recruit people who have used our service, valuing their experience, their lived experience, as expertise that we want within our organisation, we have been recruiting and training them as future support workers within our organisation. So all of this led to a very simple headline: we see you, we hear you, and we are you. But in terms of what we actually do, pre-pandemic, Clean Slate is all about helping people on low incomes become better off. We do that by helping them think about reorganising the way that they manage their money, by thinking about finding work or better paid work, and by getting online. Pre-pandemic, we were delivering services in the room, so from community spaces like libraries, community cafes, wellbeing hubs, where people could drop in and sort of present whatever it is that they have on their plate that they're struggling with, and really just helping them sort out what they can with their finances, signposting them to support if they needed it, getting them online, and helping them think about work. We also delivered money skills workshops and employability workshops, 3Bs money skills and 7 signs workshops as well. Since the pandemic, well, as soon as the pandemic struck, we had to think about how we would deliver services that weren't in the room, what I will come on to is how we've actually transformed the way that we work on that front. Quids In is our money skills initiative, and this was born really in the west of England. I was involved with the Bristol Financial Inclusion Task Force, and it became apparent that actually what was needed was more information reaching more people on low incomes in a format that they could find accessible. So drawing on my background at the Big Issue as a publisher, we thought about the kinds of publications that people might read. We emulated Take a Break or the supplements to the weekend tabloids, and designed Quids In magazine, which has now become not only a quarterly magazine, but a range of guides like this one on universal credit. We have another one on keeping food on the table on a limited budget. The guides, the Loan Shark guide, which came up, which is also translated in Bengali. We have this monthly email service, which works like the Money Saving Expert email, but is specifically for people on low income. So those who are on benefits, who are often social tenants and more likely to be struggling with their money. So one of the things that we did as part of this kind of tabloid approach to sharing information was we published back in, it was our 10th anniversary, so it would have been 2018, this 25 question kind of self-help test, how good are you at managing your money, our future-proof finance quiz. This came out in the magazine, and it's a series of 25 questions which we had identified as financial resilience indicators. And at the same time as publishing it in the magazine, there was an online version. And when you take the quiz online, anything you say, no, I don't have that, I don't have a mainstream bank account, or no, I don't open my post every day, or no, I don't have a plan for finding work, then it triggers some guidance in terms of what people might think about doing in order to move ahead and improve their financial resilience. Come the lockdown, and we had to reinvent ourselves and our service, we brought that quiz front and center of our service offer, and we began to contact people who were already in our contacts database, people who've been struggling before, to check in with them to make sure they were doing okay financially, But then we started to be approached by funders. The Good Things Foundation, who are a digital inclusion charity, came to us and said they'd got support from Joseph Rowntree Foundation, MasterCard and Lloyds Bank to provide an emergency response to the financial hardship that many people would find themselves in. Could we help? We said, yes, this is the service we're going to deliver. DWP came to us and said, we are really interested in your financial resilience service. Can you help? And we provided this approach. So we also work with landlords. We support tenants of Stonewater housing, and anyone who they refer to us who might be wobbling a little bit financially, we take them through the same process. So the process is we make contact, we ask those 25 questions, and we use the online tool. Where people are able to and they have a device available to them, they will go through that quiz at the same time at their end of the phone, and answering the questions. And then at the end, they see the guidance from the quiz, which is automatically generated, and a score. The guidance effectively is an action plan, and because of our relationship with Good Things Foundation, we embedded links. That means that if someone says, "Oh no, I haven't checked whether or not I'm claiming all that I'm entitled to from the state," then there will be an embedded short link that takes them through to the Quids in benefit calculator. They are also emailed that action plan. And then we have 3 levels of service. So depending on the funding, either 2 or 3 more sessions, 6 weeks of support, or 12 weeks of support that was provided to people, claimants who are in crisis. And then at the end of the service, or after 3 months, they take the quiz again. And from their point of view, from the participants' point of view, it's about seeing whether or not their score has increased, which we know is a score that reflects their financial resilience. But from our point of view, we're looking to see whether or not habits and attitudes have started to change, and that there is increased resilience that goes beyond, yes, I've opened a savings account, or yes, I've now accessed debt advice. So here are the 25 questions. Having taken people through an online toolkit with the 1,100 people that we had referred to us by DWP, we can see where people were struggling most. So where the bars are the lowest are the ones where people said yes in response to the questions the least. So we can see on the left-hand side, 16.9% of people said they could manage meals if their income stopped or decreased for a few weeks. So we can immediately start to see where the critical points are and what people were struggling with most. These are the 5 where they were that became priority indicators for us. Do you set aside any money for savings each day or week? Do you feel certain your money will last until you next get paid or you receive a benefit payment? Could you manage meals, which is the one I just mentioned? 18.6% of people said they, only 18.6% of people said they knew for sure they were getting all the help they were entitled to from the state. And just about 1 in 4 said they knew where to go for help if they had money problems. So this is kind of like the benchmark. All of these stats kind of give us an indication of what people have on their plate already. But then what we're able to do, because we have the information taken from having done the quiz a second time, is taking those initial benchmarks and then looking at the impact that we've made over time. So we can see from the bars at the back that on every one of those 25 questions, having taken people through the action plan and the steps that they might want to take, leading with the priorities that they had identified, each one of those indicators had increased over that period of time. We're also able then to look at those 5 indicators of priority interest for us, and we can see that against each of those there was significant impact, in particular around managing meals if their income stopped or decreased for a few weeks, and around making sure that they were getting all the help they were entitled to from the state. So almost everyone had used the benefits calculator by the end, and so would have seen whether or not they were entitled to more than they were claiming. Interestingly, even though people often feel like there's no spare cash to set aside, we had a significant impact on that question. And importantly, that people knew where to get help if they had money problems. So going from one in 4 to 1 in 2, people knowing where to go if they were struggling. Unsurprisingly, a more modest impact in terms of knowing that their income will stretch and last for the whole month. But that is, if people are on a limited income, sometimes ends just don't meet. Looking then at the other questions where we had the biggest impact, but weren't necessarily the priority ones with the lowest starting scores. I think this is quite interesting, so that we could see that people have started to think about doing things differently, and that had started pretty well. Maybe that's skewed because the people that engaged with the service had already taken that mental step, but to get to 84.3% of people saying that they were now thinking about doing things differently suggests an increase in resilience and agency and a willingness to kind of try new things to kind of get ahead. In terms of wanting to make more money and having a plan to do so, that's about employability very often. What we lead people towards but don't tell them to do is really is an understanding that, you know, if we can get you so far, but if you want to get your heads above water, then for those who can work, employment is probably the most practical answer. And then taking them through a better off calculator to help them realize that if they're on universal credit, then actually there are the tapers, there are the thresholds that should mean that they can get ahead as soon as they start working. And the other thing of note, I think for me, is the impact that we had on people and their debt and their rent arrears, and or at least taking action on those, going from 54% of people saying that they were at least taking action, moving to 87.4%. Now, we operate in the non-regulated space. We don't offer debt advice. We're focusing on habits, attitudes, and the facilities people have in place. But we can take them through a budgeting exercise and looking at income and expected expenditure, and we can help them open those horrible envelopes that they haven't opened because they're in fear of creditors chasing them for debt, so that we can actually be a shoulder to lean on while they start to take those next steps. The impact of that service for those 1,100 people referred to us by DWP was £1.3 million. So a large part of that is through paid work. So people, even those who had come to us in crisis, saying that they didn't see a future, some saying that they felt like they were actually at the end of the road, turned around their way of thinking to actually thinking about work as well. So a large number a large part of the financial gains that people made was through employment, but also by access to increased benefits, for example. So 89.9% of that is from people who used the benefits calculator and were able to increase their income. But that's a significant impact across 1,100 people. We run an impact survey at the same time as, or just around the same time as we run the quiz, use the quiz a second time as an assessment. And these were the questions that were asked. The Good Things Foundation were particularly interested because they're around digital inclusion. But we also ask about quality of life and well-being as well. So we've got some data on that, which I'm not going to share today because I'm probably over my time already, but I'm going to keep going. Overall scores, if we call them that, increased by 4 points out of 25. So it's about 15.2% raised to about 19.6% over the period of the service that we were delivering. We're actively listening. They are setting their priorities, and we are then coaching them through their progress to actually take the next steps. And in terms of the short, medium and longer term services that we delivered, we were yielding average financial gains for people of £319, £950, £2,250. The quick wins that we were able to generate, even identifying that there could be more benefits that someone was entitled to, kind of gave a sense that, oh, things can change, and people wanted to do more, and they tended to develop a sense of can-do, self-belief, a sense of agency and self-advocacy, and they felt in control and motivated for change, which was in some ways more important. And when we're talking about the cost of living crisis and what Penny was presenting about needing people to really engage with the process of change, I think this is a really important element of what we're doing. So for us, the challenge now is there is already 16 million people in poverty, and that's a government statistic from December. So that was pre worsening situation with utility bills and pre the war in Ukraine. Apparently, I was on a presentation yesterday, and the Resolution Foundation reckoned that 1.3 million people will fall into absolute poverty by 2025. So that number is increasing. We've seen that digital and financial exclusion are compound issues. One makes the other worse, and yet they're both being dealt with separately. That's something that we're trying to address by using digital tools ourselves. I'm just trying to skip through the things to speed up where I'm at. But we're trying to reach, even if we just try to reach as Clean Slate in partnership with other organisations across the UK, our ambition is to reach at least 1% of people in poverty. So that's still going from 3,000 people that we worked with last year to 160,000 people over the next 5 years. So we're asking the question, where else could we deliver this service? Can we catch people when the wheels are wobbling and but haven't yet fallen off? And can we catch, so working with those groups who are already at risk, again, as Penny mentioned, we know which groups they are, can we be doing this work with them earlier on and upstream. So Follow the Money is our WECA funded program. We're looking for stakeholders like yourselves to be referring people into our service. It's 6 weeks of financial guidance. We can meet them face to face and then start a remote service. So we would then move to calls and online support. Again, sort of like looking to generate self-belief and buy-in to the process, and then embedding habits and tangible progress. Those harsh truths that emerge organically are largely around employment. So it's about getting people to realise that this is actually a viable option for many people, but not all. And the objective that's kind of set by WECA really is to get people to a point where they're able to access mainstream provisions of support or work opportunities themselves. We have an additional offer at the moment as well, and that is where I said at the start that we see people with lived experience as part of the solution, and we recruit them, train them, and develop them towards becoming support workers within our organisation. We have started talking to employers across the health sector, care sector and support sector, general support sector, about whether or not we could help identify people who are ready to bring that lived experience, frame it in a professional way, and then present themselves as eligible and valid candidates to fill hard to fill vacancies in those sectors. The great thing about it, if we can make it work, is that it's then about really engaging those communities and making them, making them part of a solution, while at the same time bringing that, our services into those communities as well. Elements is the name of the program. So pretty much finally then, what we're looking to do from today really is to create partnerships across the west of England, obviously tackling cost of living crisis, wherever possible, upstream prevention of hardship, hardship and debt and arrears amongst the at-risk groups, and reducing the demand for crisis support or reducing the demand on crisis support services. I think there's more we can do by working together, and I haven't seen so much that's around resilience and prevention as I have around crisis intervention, and I think that we have something to offer that actually will complement those and can actually help nurture financial resilience across communities. And hopefully what we can do is generate proof of concept. So using the same methodology to sort of capture impact and also intelligence about what people are struggling with and actually what can make the biggest difference to them. So I hope you will sign up to the Quids in Professional Network, but that is my presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, and bang on time, only 1 minute over to my schedule anyway. Thank you very much. I hope everybody, had a good connection and got everything that Jeff was presenting. If you do have any questions around the wider picture or the more specific picture, what we're offering in the west of England at the moment, please do let us know. You can contact me directly or via our website, and we're going to be very happy to help out with any information or have meetings to discuss any collaborations if you were interested in that. We do have a few more minutes for any questions and answers for Jeff. Are there any questions for Jeff to answer?
Yeah, no, not particularly. A couple we've kind of covered in the chat as we've been going along, but yes, I don't think it has, unless anyone would quickly like to add one now. Oh, sorry, Ian Corey. Are Clean Slate supporting people to set up community groups?
It's not part of our plan at the moment. It's not a bad idea. I think that would fit really well and be consistent with our vision to include communities as part of the solution. As part of the solution to the cost of living crisis. I need to give that more thought. Caught me on the back foot there, Ian. Nice work.
Thanks, Ian. And how would we refer a customer to your service? We can send a link out to that, actually, can't we? When we send the follow-up information and the video. Is that probably the best way?
I've just popped our website link. There's a portal on the website. We've made it as easy as we possibly can. So you just click where you are and then fill in a few details, and it goes into our system and joins our waiting list, which is not long.
Great.
I guess the other thing to say is that we do have the drop-in services, so dotted around the west of England. There are some drop-ins that people can just come along and see us. Obviously, that only helps people in the areas local to those drop-ins, which is why the remote service, where the remote service comes into its own. But if people do want to come along for a chat, or if agencies would like to host us delivering a drop-in service, then I think that would be good. We'd be happy to do that as well if we can.
Could I just add also, we aim to make contact with people within 3 working days where we can, and on lots of our virtual support, we aim to have that first appointment within 7 working days if we can.
Great. A question from Jenny Crossley. What's happening with collaboration with other agencies like CAB?
So it is a mixed picture. Depending on the area. So in Bath, for example, we have a good working relationship with CAB, where if they have an inquiry from someone who could really just is looking to sort of like run through their financial needs at in a non-regulated way, then they'll pass people along to us, especially if they're from a group that might have additional barriers such as housing issues or mental health issues. So they will see us as being like kind of a specialist provider to that group. In other areas, I think that's still to be worked up. I do think there's an opportunity for us and services like what I've just presented to help do some heavy lifting with people who are waiting for debt advice, and I think there's some collaborations there to be set up as well.
Great, fantastic. Thank you, Tracy, saying how important what you were saying about early intervention and upstream help is. Thank you, Nicola. You shared some information there. Combined Authority funded Community Support Fund. Can
I just raise Denise's point about, is it better that people are aware that there are huge issues rising on the horizon, or is this all too overwhelming? How can we get the message right? I really feel that one, Denise.
From my point of view, I don't think there's a clear picture on this in terms of information sharing, because in all the years up to the pandemic where universal credit was being rolled out, as a prime example of where people were really struggling, claimants were really struggling to make that transition, no amount of information sharing could get claimants to see the challenges they might face when they moved on to universal credit. And time after time after time, local authorities were reporting at events like this and that we would be attending, that the first time that people actually took any notice of these warnings was when they had no payment coming into their account. I think from our point of view as a publisher in particular, sharing information is just a drip feed of, and this happened and this happened and this is what you can do about it and this is what you can do about it, and just hoping that we catch people at the right moment when they are ready and their ears are open to this. I watched on Twitter this morning, Martin Lewis has produced a video, really an open letter video to the candidates of the Tory Leadership Challenge, really just outlining how bad things are actually going to get in the next 12 months. It's a 10-minute video. I know for a start, Quids in readers wouldn't watch it. And I'm not entirely sure that the leadership candidates would spend 10 minutes watching it either. So these things are all about, you know, medium and message and all of this sort of stuff, but I don't think anyone really has quite worked out how to get these messages across to people about taking early action, which is why I think focusing on, for instance, a money health check for people who are in an at-risk group at any time, rather than waiting until they say, I'm in financial trouble, is totally the way to go.
Great, thank you. And then just one final question from Gent. On your website, it says you help people with getting online. Do you mean helping people who are not computer literate to fill in forms online, etc.?
I think in a practical way, yes. It's more about providing people with access to devices and data in partnership with the Good Things Foundation, and it's about supporting people where we do have the drop-ins and we have, if there are IT facilities there, we can guide people through that process. And then when people are doing the money health check, there are very practical steps that people can take, and then we can walk them through that process as best we can. But we're not digital champions. There are many, but not enough, organizations out there doing that work, and we're not trying to duplicate that. We're just trying to take a practical need and kind of incentivize those skills. So it's like, well, actually, you know, we could help you become better off by being online, but there's only so far we can go. Then it'll be signposting people into other organizations who can provide more comprehensive and specialist detailed support.
Great, thank you. I think we've only overrun by about 5 minutes, so back over to you, Anna.
Thank you very much, Lisa, Emma, and Jeff, of course. So thanks for all the questions. I think there was some really interesting stuff there and a lot of food for thought. And I would like to now start preparing, getting into the breakout rooms, if that's all right. So we have 8 breakout rooms prepared as far as I'm aware. We have each breakout room being led by one of our staff members. And we have a couple of questions prepared that we would like you to discuss. Could you please take, we said 20 minutes. I'm wondering now in terms of timekeeping, should we keep it to 20, maybe more like 15, so that we can discuss the outcomes. So in 15 minutes, get together and discuss what we are doing at the moment in terms of the cost of living crisis, how we can help individuals, how we can learn from each other, what the barriers are that you and your services are experiencing, and how we could collaborate more, join the dots more. And if I can ask to please focus on the can do rather than on the things that are not within our control. Yes, that's that from me. So if Dan could send out some invites for the different rooms, and everybody could join, and then I shall see everybody back at 11:20. Hi, everybody. people are streaming back in. We got cut off mid-sentence. It was a really interesting conversation we had, as they always are. Yes, I really often think breakout rooms are very rarely long enough to get to the bottom of it, or even share everybody's views. But thanks for everybody for joining back. I think everybody is back in the room. Somehow my camera is off. Oh, sorry guys. Now I think it's back on. Should be back on. There. Can I just ask the different staff members that were leading the conversations in the different rooms to cut back with one or two main points, if possible? Who was chairing group number 1?
I don't actually know which number our group was, sorry.
No worries. Helen, you take it away.
Okay. So we were talking a lot about, what services we provide. And then the main point I think we all agreed with was that resources are limited. We all need to, have more. The more you dig into what help you could give, the more funding you would want to have available, which we don't have. Organisations are quite stretched at the moment, so it's really important to focus on what you're good at and not try to be jack of all trades, but to work in partnership with other organisations who are the experts in a particular area. For instance, Age UK is a common partner, and one of the team commented that older people are very unlikely to ask for help initially. So that's a specific organisation that's really the expert in helping older people. And so making sure those partnerships are strong is really important.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Helen, and whichever group you were in. Who wants to come in next?
I think I was leading group 2.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Sarah.
So we echoed a lot of the points that Helen's just mentioned about resources being stretched, and we talked about the difficulty of building resilience, which is what obviously was spoken about in the presentation, when resources are stretched and when times are so tough, and we agreed that this is possibly one of the biggest hurdles we face. I know we're focusing on the can do, but we can't really not mention that, because building resilience, if that's what we're focusing on, but resources are stretched, then it's really, really challenging. But the things we did talk about are the things that are in place already. So things like having the advice, signposting people to services and funds which could help them, hardship funds, vouchers, that sort of thing, really maximising these. We did acknowledge that these are sticking plasters. They're not going to be long-term fixes, but we need to really continue to keep utilising these things that are already at our disposal. Looking at well-being, emotional well-being at this time, that's something that that we have and we can do, and referrals are for mental health support are increasing, and we probably expect that they would continue to increase. So that's something that a concrete positive thing that we can be doing, that will help us to build resilience for the future. In terms of support, Jeff has actually just shared a couple of really useful links in the chat just now that we talked about, that probably all of us on this call would be interested in and will find useful. So if you just look at the couple of links that Jeff has just shared there, they're for a cost of living support campaign and a toolkit for clients to get the it's a sort of one-stop shop kind of for support. And I've not actually opened them yet, but they sound like exactly the sort of thing that all of us could be using. And the last thing we talked about was collaboration. Again, events like this can be so useful. I think for keeping morale up when things are so tough as well, because when you speak to like-minded people, it does kind of, you do leave events like this with a bit more motivation and morale to kind of just keep going when resources are stretched and the demands are so huge. Sorry, I've talked far too much, but we did have really good chats. But that's I'll stop there. Those are the main things we spoke about.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Jeff, for sharing the links. I think, yeah, it just goes to show that there's a lot to talk about and that we have so many really interesting people on the call that are happy and willing to share their thoughts and ideas, which is really great. I was the team in team 3, group 3, room 3. Just going to feedback. So I had a lot of expertise around housing in my call, which was really interesting. And I could also hear from the feeding back, you know, the not despair, but how did you put it earlier, Sarah? People struggling that maybe they don't have enough resources at hand to help the people. And one thing that was also mentioned was that different pots of money are not being accessed because it's not being communicated down well from the councils or from the government or this and that. And then you have this big pots of money sitting there, nobody's aware of them, and so that nobody claims for them. And so it's a matter of, I think, communicating and raising awareness and sharing those resources if we get aware of them. And then another point was, referring to other organizations that have the expertise. So outsourcing, basically referring on working together in partnership with other organizations to make sure that every individual gets the best support possible. Group number 4, or any group for that. Lisa?
Yeah, I think that was my group. I'm not entirely sure. We had a great conversation. As always, not enough time, but just to feedback on a couple of points. In kind of very large organizations, we talked about bringing all departments together. So again, partnership working kind of internally, but also externally, and kind of joined up thinking. We talked about, obviously, as we all know, the situation is going to get so much worse in the autumn, and about trying to engage people before they're in crisis point. So, you know, the focus on engaging people now before the winter hits. And we talked about the kind of training of frontline staff who aren't necessarily experienced in talking about money, but giving them the tools and the confidence and the skills to start a conversation about money with the people they're working and supporting with on the front line. So that was really interesting. But I think just to explain as well, we're going to write up all the notes from the breakout rooms, and we'll be able to share those afterwards as well.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I think training frontline staff, the whole money conversation can be a bit of a tricky one, can't it? So I think that's a really, really good point to be taken forward. Group number 5.
I'm really not sure what group number I was, but I'll go for it.
Emmy's group.
Yeah, the similar kind of things as we thought might happen from all of the groups, really. We started off talking about how it's harder to find quick wins now, and how we're really having to sort of shift our focus to maximising income. We flipped that very quickly to try and turn the conversation to being positive, and talked a lot about connecting communities and how actually it's further than that, connecting services within communities and having those one-stop shops, those sort of launches and drop-ins, how that's really useful to bring communities and community organisations and everyone together in one space, in a positive space as well, where you have sort of food and things, you know, things that you can all share, where you can openly talk about things with people experiencing similar situations. We talked about accessible support as well, with the rise in work poverty, and how hybrid services are really good for that. We talked about how COVID gave us a bit of a head start in sort of being able to develop those hybrid services, and also in empowering people to for us to be able to guide people into doing some things for themselves with our guidance. We talked then about getting creative and breathing positivity into what we can do, and how important that is at the moment. We talked a bit about the sort of tools that we have as support workers, and how we can get creative with those to hopefully help people improve their financial well-being and resilience. Yeah.
Oh, great feedback. Thank you very much, Emmy. Group number 7, is it?
It may have been me. I'm afraid I don't know what number it was, but I'll feedback anyhow. So our group was really interesting because it was really well represented. So we had people kind of representing from Cambridgeshire, from Knowsley, and from CAB and from Astor Housing. So there was a really nice conversation there. We tended to talk, we were trying to be positive, but we did also talk about the frustrations, particularly where, for example, with the local councils, where big pots of money come from central government, and how they're very often last minute and ring fenced as well, which makes planning really tricky on a local level. And it means that, for example, there may be money coming further down the line, but is it going to be with the same rules as the money that they've just had? So are they going to be able to plan in the same way? So that's really tricky. But there were some really great examples. Everyone said, we feel like we're being really knee-jerk at the moment, you know, for example, like handing out fuel vouchers and food vouchers, but we'd like to be more proactive. And there were some examples of that as well, which were really great. So, for example, when new tenants move into a property, having a call with them at that point, rather than waiting for any crisis to kind of rear its head, and then putting things in place at that point. And then I think it was Sue in Cambridgeshire was talking about having conversations with sort of young working families who are on UC, who and actually kind of putting stuff in place for them there, so they don't kind of get to the point where they have a lag in their UC or anything like that before their support is in place. And that's hasn't launched yet, but they're kind of working on that. So I think it's really positive that everyone's kind of thinking really creatively. And there was loads more, but we'll add it all into the notes at the end. So that's great.
Thank you, Naomi. Next, is it the last group?
Is it me?
It's Steph.
Is it me left? Okay, so also had a really interesting conversation. Unfortunately, didn't get to that last question. We discussed so the challenges, the barriers, key barriers that organisations are facing at the moment. One of them being a drop in engagement, and we wondered whether this might be down to fatigue with the just people being bombarded with messages about the cost of living crisis, and it just sort of saturating the media. Are people a bit fatigued by this, and is this sort of impacting how they then process that information and act on it? We also talked about long waiting lists and the need for more capacity. Also, another challenge, staff welfare, again, I guess linked to the issue of fatigue, and how the engagement from volunteers and staff is harder because their time at the moment is precious. They're dealing also with the cost of living crisis themselves, and this then impacts on the success of collaboration. In terms of what's working well at the moment, so Wendy from Carrion Housing mentioned that a key change there is that they are equipping frontline workers with advice to give to residents so that they don't have to wait for an appointment. They can impart that knowledge straight away. So, for example, you know, using websites and benefits calculators to encourage people to support themselves and to be empowered where they have the capacity to do that. Also delivering, Wendy was saying they're delivering money must-dos. So these are very similar to what we heard earlier, key messages that are being shared with people so that knowledge can be drip fed. This is building the confidence of frontline staff who might not have done lots of training in money guidance.
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, it seems there's a lot of things overlapping, not only from the working groups now, but also from the previous presentation from Penny and Jeff. So that's really encouraging to see that we're all kind of on the same page, I think. Did I leave any groups out? I think we covered. Oh, Emma, I'm sorry. Emma.
I'm really gonna. It's not my skill being not talking very much, but I'm not going to talk very much. I just wanted to echo a lot of what Steph had said. Great. Thank you so much for your comments. But again, we had capacity. Without funding, how do you increase capacity? How do you support frontline staff to not feel demoralised? Engagement is an issue when people feel overwhelmed, whether it's staff or it's clients. How do you get people to engage? The bigger the problem, the harder it is for people to tackle it. We know about that one. And I also wanted to talk about, there's a good example where the welfare support in Baines and St John's Charitable Foundation have been coordinating their crisis response really well, with the goal of shifting everything upstream and being able to work more preventatively And also we mentioned home visits and how important they are in rural areas to when we think about communities, is people just not coming into the community to access services. And a really good point raised by Mel, and I think you're in Worthing, Mel, I'm really sorry if I got that wrong, but we do a lot of talking to communities who don't have anything, and we don't talk to communities who have enough. And maybe we should be thinking about those links as well, rather than all of our efforts aimed at people who are already flat out surviving. That's it.
So really good points. Makes me feel like I wanted to be part of every single group, really, and I'm really looking forward to those notes. That's really exciting. Thank you so much, everybody, for all your contributions. Sorry, we ran a little bit over. I just want to give 3 more sentences before I send you off to your rest of your Wednesdays. First of all, thanks so much for coming. We really appreciate that so many people have shown up and showed their interest and their expertise. And we hope that you found it useful. We found it really, really insightful and helpful. Please don't forget to fill in the feedback form if you can, please. Also, there's, I think, a lot of other very useful hits and tips and links on the chat. If there's anything that you didn't manage to copy out or anything, let us know. We can send it out via email. Another big thanks to WECA, I wanted to say, for funding our current service offer in the west of England, which also made this event possible. I did not want to not mention that, because that's really big help at the moment to reaching all those communities in the west of England. And well, all I can say is I hope you have a really lovely rest of your day. We hope to see you soon at another event. We're going to run more of these, because I think everybody that has come found them hopefully helpful and insightful. Definitely we did. And have a good rest of your day, everybody. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Bye.